June 8th, 1966, California desert, 10:31 in the morning. Joe Walker looks over at me from the XB-70 cockpit and smiles. The sun reflects off his helmet visor, turning him into something between a test pilot and an angel. His voice crackles through the radio, warm and easy, like we're discussing baseball instead of flying the fastest bomber ever built. "See you at the barbecue tonight, Ray. Helen's making ribs, right?" I laugh. "She makes terrible ribs. But yeah, come over anyway." "Deal. We'll grab beer on the way." 90 seconds later, he's fighting for his life in a fireball. 90 seconds later, Carl Thompson is trapped in a steel capsule that won't open, spinning toward the desert floor at 300 miles per hour. 90 seconds later, I'm watching the aircraft I spent 11 years building fall from the sky like a broken dream, and the only sound I can make is a scream that has no words. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That's what grief does. It collapses time. It makes the before and after blend together until you can't remember which version of yourself you're supposed to be. The man who built the impossible or the man who killed his friends while trying. Let me start where it really begins. Not with the crash, not with the fire, but with the dream itself. Because every nightmare starts as a dream, and this one was beautiful enough to justify everything we did, everything we built, everything we lost. The formation flight that morning was supposed to be simple. 5 aircraft flying together for publicity photographs. General Electric wanted promotional images for Aviation Week magazine. All 5 aircraft used GE engines. The XB-70 Valkyrie with its 6 massive YJ-93 turbojets, an F-104 Starfighter, an F-4 Phantom, an F-5 Freedom Fighter, a T-38 Talon. Nothing dangerous, nothing technical, just flying in formation at 25,000 feet, subsonic speeds, perfect California weather. The sky was so blue it hurt to look at directly. Not a cloud anywhere. Visibility unlimited. The kind of morning where you could see from Edwards Air Force Base all the way to the mountains, sharp and clear, like God had wiped the windshield of the world. I stood on the observation platform with Helen beside me. She'd taken the day off work to watch. First time she'd seen the XB-70 fly in person, even though I'd been working on it since 1955. 11 years of marriage to an aircraft she had only seen in photographs and technical drawings spread across our dining room table at midnight. "It's beautiful," she said when the Valkyrie rolled onto the runway. "I didn't expect it to be beautiful." And it was. God help me, it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever built. 185 feet long, gleaming white in stainless steel. Delta wings spanning 105 feet, sharp as knife blades. The fuselage sleek and predatory, like something that belonged in the next century, not 1966. When the 6 engines spooled up, the sound wasn't just noise. It was power made audible. It was mathematics turned into thunder. The other aircraft formed up around the Valkyrie like an honor guard. Smaller fighters surrounding the massive bomber, all of them children, playing in the shadow of a giant. The chase plane with the photographer took position above and to the side, cameras ready. Radio chatter crackled through the speakers on the observation platform. Professional, calm, routine. "Edwards Tower, this is Valkyrie 02 formation, established all our aircraft steady." "Copy that, Valkyrie. Maintain current altitude and heading. Photo run commencing." Joe Walker's voice. Relaxed. No indication that in less than 2 minutes everything would end. The formation passed overhead. I could see them through my binoculars. The XB-70 looked massive even at 25,000 feet, its white paint brilliant against the blue sky. The smaller fighters tucked in close, professional precision flying. Beautiful. All of it was beautiful. Helen squeezed my hand. "You did this, Ray. You built that." I wanted to say something humble. Something about the team, about the engineers, about the years of work from hundreds of people. But pride is honest sometimes, and in that moment I let myself feel it. Yes, I built that. I took an impossible specification from the Pentagon and turned it into reality. I proved that sustained Mach 3 flight wasn't science fiction. I vindicated 11 years of people telling me it couldn't be done. The F-104 Starfighter drifted slightly, just a few feet. Mike Adams was flying at adjusting position for a better camera angle. Nothing unusual. Formation flying requires constant tiny corrections. The F-104 moved aft and inboard, positioning itself behind the XB-70's right wing, and then it entered the vortex. From the ground, we couldn't see the invisible column of rotating air spinning off the XB-70's massive wingtip. We couldn't see the aerodynamic trap that physics had set. We could only watch as the F-104 suddenly rolled violently to the left, fighting forces no pilot could overcome. The vertical stabilizer of the F-104 struck the XB-70's right wing. Metal screamed against metal at 300 miles per hour. The F-104's fuselage slid forward into the XB-70's right vertical stabilizer. Then the F-104 exploded. The fireball bloomed orange and black against the blue sky. Debris scattered in all directions. The shockwave rippled outward in a visible ring of compressed air. And for a moment, just a moment, I thought maybe the XB-70 would survive. It continued flying straight and level. The massive delta wings held steady. The 6 engines kept their thunder. For 16 seconds, nothing seemed wrong except for the smoke trail marking where the F-104 had been. 16 seconds of false hope. Then the yaw began. Without its vertical stabilizers, the XB-70 had no directional control. The nose swung right. The aircraft began rotating around its vertical axis like a slow-motion top. The pilots fought it with differential thrust, with ailerons, with everything they had. Joe Walker's voice came through the radio, still professional, still trained not to panic, but I could hear the strain underneath. Edwards Tower, Valkyrie 02, we've lost both vertical stabilizers. Aircraft not responding to rudder inputs, attempting to maintain control with differential thrust. The XB-70 entered a flat spin. I've seen a lot of aircraft accidents in my career. I've reviewed footage, I've read reports, I've attended briefings where they analyze every millisecond of failure. But nothing prepared me for watching it happen in real time to an aircraft I built with a friend in the cockpit. The Valkyrie rotated slowly, not the violent tumbling of a fighter. This was almost graceful, like a falling leaf, a 550,000-pound falling leaf made of steel and titanium and broken dreams. We're in flat spin, Joe's voice crackled. Cannot recover. Carl, we need to eject. The escape capsule system I'd helped design was supposed to save them, not traditional ejection seats. Those would be fatal at high speed. Instead, the entire cockpit section would close around each crew member, forming a protective shell. Then the capsules would separate from the aircraft and descend by parachute. Carl Thompson initiated his sequence. I know because the investigation would later show it in the telemetry. The capsule doors began closing around him, but the violent rotation of the flat spin created G-forces the system wasn't designed for. The separation mechanism jammed. Carl's capsule sealed shut but never separated from the aircraft. He was trapped inside a steel coffin, aware he was about to die, unable to do anything about it. Joe Walker's capsule separated successfully. I saw it through the binoculars. A small object breaking away from the spinning bomber, tumbling for a moment before the parachute deployed. A tiny white flower blooming in hell. The XB-70 continued its rotation. Down, down, still almost graceful. Still impossible to believe this was happening. Helen's fingernails dug into my palm. She was screaming something. I couldn't hear her over the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears. The impact happened 8 miles from Edwards Air Force Base. 550,000 pounds of aircraft. 40,000 gallons of jet fuel. The physics are simple and terrible. The fireball was visible from Las Vegas, 200 miles away. I don't remember running toward the crash site. I don't remember security tackling me to keep me away from the flames. I don't remember Helen pulling me back, or Marcus Washington, one of our facility supervisors, grabbing my shoulders and holding me upright while I vomited into the desert sand. What I remember is the smell: burning metal, burning fuel, burning rubber, and underneath it all, something else, something organic, something that had been human 90 seconds ago. And I remember thinking with perfect clarity, I built that. I killed them. Mike Adams in the F-104 died instantly in the initial explosion. His family would have a closed casket funeral. There wasn't enough left for anything else. Carl Thompson died on impact with the desert floor, trapped in the escape capsule that was supposed to save him. He left behind a wife and 3 children. The youngest was 6 years old. Joe Walker survived the ejection, but suffered severe spinal compression fractures, internal bleeding, and injuries that would end his flying career forever. He would live another 38 years, but he would never pilot another aircraft. Never feel that moment when the wheels leave the runway and the Earth lets go. The investigation would take 6 months. They would conclude it was an accident, aerodynamic phenomenon. The F-104 entered the wingtip vortex produced by the XB-70's massive delta wings. No design flaw, no pilot error, just physics and tragedy intersecting in 3 dimensions. But standing there in the desert watching black smoke rise into that perfect blue sky, I didn't need 6 months of investigation. I knew the truth immediately. I had built the most advanced aircraft in human history. I had proven sustained Mach 3 flight was possible. I had solved problems that the greatest minds in aerospace said were unsolvable, and my creation had killed 2 men during a publicity photograph. But to understand why that crash destroyed more than just an aircraft, why it ended a dream that started in a Pentagon briefing room where generals laughed at the impossible, I need to take you back. Back to 1944 when I learned what impossible really meant. Back to a February morning over Berlin when I had 3 dead engines and 400 miles of enemy territory between my crew and home. Back to when I was just Raymond Mitchell navigator on a B-17 bomber, and death was something that happened to other crews. February 22nd, 1944. The sky over Berlin was black with flak. Every burst left a dark flower of smoke that the bombers had to fly through. The German 88mm guns were accurate at our altitude. They didn't need to hit you directly. If a shell exploded within 30 feet, the shrapnel would shred your aircraft. Our B-17, nicknamed Wichita Thunder, was part of a massive raid on German aircraft factories. Big Week, they called it. The Allied air forces throwing everything they had at Germany's aviation industry, 1,500 bombers, 800 fighters. The sky over Europe was crowded with aircraft trying to kill each other. We just dropped our bombs on the target when the flak hit us. The first shell exploded beneath the No. 3 engine, shredding it with shrapnel. The engine immediately caught fire. The pilot feathered the prop, cutting fuel to prevent the whole wing from burning. The second shell hit our radio compartment. The radio operator, a kid from Ohio named Tommy Chen, died instantly. I don't talk about that part much. There's no good way to describe what high explosive shrapnel does to a human body in an enclosed space. The third shell destroyed our No. 2 engine and punctured the fuel tanks in the left wing. Now we had 2 dead engines on the left side. The B-17 started losing altitude. The pilot fought to keep us level, but physics has rules that don't care about courage. The No. 4 engine began running rough, probably took damage from the flak. The pilot shut it down before it seized. 3 engines dead, 1 engine running. We were 300 miles from the nearest Allied airfield, and we were falling out of the sky. The pilot's voice came through the intercom. Calm, professional. Navigator, I need options. We're not making it back to England. I looked at my charts, did the math with my E6B calculator, and dead reckoning. Calculated our rate of descent, our remaining fuel, the wind at altitude, every variable I could think of. The math said we should bail out over Germany, become prisoners of war, hope we survive to see the end of the war. But I kept calculating, checking numbers, looking for something everyone else said didn't exist. Pilot navigator, if we maintain current heading and glide ratio, we can make Manston. Manston was an emergency landing field on the coast of England, 400 miles away. We had 1 engine and were descending at 500 feet per minute. Navigator pilot, the numbers don't work. Sir, the numbers work if we're perfect. If we hit every checkpoint exactly. If the winds cooperate, if nothing else breaks. Silence on the intercom. The rest of the crew waiting to hear if we were bailing out or betting our lives on impossible mathematics. Everybody else says we can't make it. Yes, sir. That's why we have to try. My father, Frank Mitchell, worked on the assembly line at Ford Motor Company's River Rouge plant. 43 years riveting bomber fuselages, including B-24s. His hands were scarred from molten metal splashes. His hearing was gone from pneumatic hammers. But those hands put me through DeWitt Clinton High School. Those hands made it possible for me to go to Wayne State University on a partial scholarship before Pearl Harbor. The night before I shipped out to navigator training, my father took me to the plant floor, showed me the B-24s being built, the bombers that would carry other men's sons into combat. See that rivet pattern on the tail section? he said, pointing to a line of metal fasteners. That's mine. Every rivet I set, I think about the boys who will fly in that aircraft. I think about their mothers, their fathers. I think about making every rivet perfect so those boys come home. When you're up there, you remember. Detroit built every piece keeping you alive. Every rivet, every weld, every bolt. Don't let us down, son. Flying over Germany on one engine descending toward either England or death, I thought about my father's rivets. I thought about every worker at River Rouge who touched our B-17. I thought about the responsibility I had to get my crew home. So I navigated. 3 hours, one engine, 400 miles. I called out heading corrections every 2 minutes, adjusted for wind drift, calculated fuel consumption, monitored our glide ratio like my life depended on it because it did. The rest of the formation had left us behind. We were alone in the sky, a wounded bird trying to make it to the coast. German fighters could have finished us easily, but they were busy with the main bomber stream. We were too damaged, too slow, too pathetic to waste ammunition on. We crossed the English Channel with 12 gallons of fuel remaining. I could see Manston emergency field ahead, white cliffs, green fields, the runway. We landed with the engine sputtering, rolled to a stop, sat in silence for a moment. Then the pilot turned around and looked at me. Mitchell, that was the best damn navigating I've ever seen. You just saved 9 lives with a slide rule and stubbornness. 8 lives, sir. Tommy didn't make it. No, he didn't. But the rest of us did because you refused to accept impossible. That mission taught me something. The impossible is just math you haven't solved yet. The limitations everyone agrees on are just calculations nobody's bothered to check. And if you're willing to be perfect, if you're willing to hit every checkpoint exactly, you can do things everyone else says can't be done. That lesson would carry me through the rest of the war. 28 missions, 2 more times shot down over occupied Europe and rescued by the resistance, a Distinguished Service Cross, a promotion, and a reputation as the navigator who could find the way home when everyone else said it was impossible. When the war ended, I came home to Detroit, used the GI Bill to go to NYC, studied mechanical engineering, married Helen Pierce, who'd been working as a secretary in the engineering department, started a family, had 2 daughters, Susan in 1953 and Rebecca in 1955, got a job at North American Aviation in 1950 as a junior engineer, worked my way up through the F-100 Super Sabre program, the first supersonic fighter. And in 1955, when the Air Force issued a requirement for a bomber that could cruise at Mach 3, everyone said it was impossible. So naturally, I wanted to try. March 1955, Pentagon briefing room, 30 generals in dress uniforms, me in a cheap suit, sweating through my shirt, holding charts and graphs and calculations that said we could build an aircraft that flew 3 times the speed of sound. I stood at the front of that room and explained how we'd do it. Stainless steel honeycomb construction, titanium leading edges, 6 massive turbojet engines, compression lift from captured shock waves. Every technical detail I could cram into 20 minutes. When I finished, there was silence, then laughter. A 3-star general leaned back in his chair. Son, you're describing science fiction. The B-52 barely hit 600 miles per hour. You're talking about 2,000 miles per hour. The heat alone would melt aluminum like butter. Then we won't use aluminum, sir. More laughter. But I wasn't joking. I was calculating, running numbers in my head, thinking about my father's rivets, thinking about the B-17 over Germany with 1 engine, thinking about how impossible just means nobody's solved the math yet. The Air Force gave North American Aviation the contract in December 1955. $1.5 billion, 2 prototypes to be built, operational deployment planned for 1963, a fleet of 200 aircraft. I became chief engineer, built a team of 23 engineers. Half were World War II veterans like me. The rest were young hotshots from NYC and Caltech who thought slide rules could solve anything. Our first team meeting, I put the specifications on the blackboard. Mach 3, 70,000 feet altitude, 600-degree skin temperatures, 4,000-mile range, payload of 14 nuclear weapons. Gentlemen, I said the Air Force is asking us to build something that doesn't exist using materials that don't exist with engines that don't exist. A young engineer raised his hand. So we're screwed. No, we're in 1955. We have slide rules, wind tunnels, and the fact that everyone says it's impossible. I've done impossible before. Let's do it again. We called it the XB-70 Valkyrie, named after the Norse maidens who chose who lived and died in battle. The aircraft would choose which Soviet cities lived or died. Dark poetry, but accurate. But while I was building my dream in California 5,000 miles away in Moscow, another engineer was reading intelligence reports about the XB-70. And he was having nightmares. His name was Viktor Petrov. He was 48 years old in 1955. He'd survived the siege of Leningrad. He'd designed aircraft while starving. He'd watched his wife die of malnutrition while German artillery shattered his city. He'd spent the war building weapons with frozen hands in unheated workshops, while rats ate the glue out of the aircraft blueprints. When the KGB intelligence report about the American XB-70 program landed on his desk, Viktor Petrov read it 3 times. Then he walked to the window of his Moscow office and looked out at the apartment buildings being reconstructed, at the city rising from the ashes of the war, at the future he'd helped preserve by designing fighters that kept the Luftwaffe from destroying everything. The American bomber would erase all of it, would kill millions who'd already survived one war, would turn Moscow and Leningrad into radioactive wastelands, would make his wife's death meaningless, would make the siege meaningless, would make everything he'd survived and sacrificed meaningless. Viktor Petrov was assigned to design an interceptor to kill my bomber, the MiG-25 Foxbat, and he would build it with the same desperate determination I was building the XB-70. 2 engineers, 2 veterans, 2 weapons for a war we both prayed would never come. But what neither of us knew what would change, everything, was that in less than 10 years, Victor would be sitting in a Texas ranch kitchen, tasting bacon for the first time in his life and crying because it tasted like truth. The first impossible problem was heat. Summer 1956, North American Aviation Wind Tunnel Facility at Edwards Air Force Base. We placed an aluminum test panel in supersonic airflow and brought the temperature to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. The panel began warping like taffy in the sun. At 600 degrees, it would have melted completely. My metallurgist, a brilliant man named Howard Chen, held up the destroyed panel. "Sir, we need titanium. Lots of it. Problem is 90% of the world's processed titanium comes from the Soviet Union." The irony burned hotter than the wind tunnel. America would buy Soviet metal to build a bomber designed to destroy Moscow. We would purchase the very material from the enemy to construct their annihilation. The Cold War had its own dark sense of humor. We found a solution that summer, not pure titanium, which was too expensive and too difficult to obtain in the quantities we needed. Instead, we developed a hybrid construction. Stainless steel honeycomb panels with titanium used only on the leading edges where temperatures peaked. The honeycomb structure provided strength while minimizing weight. The titanium protected the critical surfaces. But this created a new problem. Welding titanium to stainless steel at the scale we needed had never been done before. Traditional welding techniques wouldn't work. The metals had different thermal properties, different melting points, different everything. So we invented a new welding technique, electron beam welding in a vacuum chamber. The focused beam of electrons melted the metals together at the molecular level without contamination from air. We built the welding equipment ourselves because nothing commercially available could do what we needed. That's how it went for 6 years. Every solution created a new problem. Every problem required inventing something that didn't exist. The second impossible problem was engines. We needed power that had never been generated before. 6 engines, each producing 30,000 pounds of thrust with afterburner engaged. The General Electric YG-93 turbojet existed only as a specification on paper when we started. GE had to design and build it from scratch. The engines would run at temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit internally. The fuel system had to do double duty. Beyond simply powering the engines, the JP6 fuel would act as a heat sink, absorbing thermal energy from the airframe before being burned. The fuel would flow through channels in the skin, cooling the structure, then circulate to the engines already preheated for more efficient combustion. This thermodynamic balancing act required precise engineering. Too much fuel cooling and the engines would flame out. Too little and the airframe would fail from heat stress. We calculated flow rates to 4 decimal places, tested thousands of combinations, failed repeatedly until we got it right. I spent nights at the facility drinking bad coffee from the cafeteria running calculations until my eyes burned. Helen would leave a thermos of good coffee on my desk with notes. "Come home safe, girls miss you." I'd find them in the morning, the coffee cold, the notes folded and tucked in my wallet next to the photograph of my B-17 crew. The third impossible problem changed everything. October 1957, wind tunnel test. We were examining airflow patterns around the XB-70 at Mach 3. The shock wave from the aircraft's nose created a visible compression zone underneath the fuselage. Most engineers viewed shock waves as drag, as something to minimize and avoid. But a young aerodynamicist from Caltech named Daniel Park noticed something unusual. "What if we capture that shock wave?" he asked, pointing at the flow visualization. "What if we trap it underneath and use it?" The concept seemed insane, but we tested it anyway. We designed the wingtips to fold downward during supersonic flight up to 65 degrees. The downward folded tips would create a compression chamber underneath the fuselage, trapping the nose shockwave. The trapped shockwave would generate additional lift, compression lift, like surfing your own pressure wave. The math worked. The wind tunnel test confirmed it. Compression lift reduced drag by 33% at Mach 3. It was the breakthrough that made the entire XB-70 concept viable. We weren't just building an airplane. We were building something that used physics in ways no one had used before. The fourth impossible problem was keeping the crew alive. At 2,000 miles per hour, air density becomes a brick wall. Traditional ejection seats would kill the pilots instantly. The deceleration forces would be lethal. So we designed escape capsules. The entire cockpit section around each crew member would close like a clamshell, forming a protective shell. Then the capsules would separate from the aircraft and descend by parachute. We tested this system with crash dummies at supersonic speeds. The first 12 tests failed. Capsules tumbled, parachutes tangled. Dummies experienced G-forces that would have killed a human. But we kept refining, adjusting, calculating. By May 1959, we had a system that worked in testing, always testing, never actual combat, never actual high-speed ejection, with a human life depending on mathematics and engineering and hope. The fifth impossible problem was navigation. GPS wouldn't exist for another 20 years. The XB-70 had to navigate 4,000 miles, find Moscow, and deliver its weapons with precision, using only an inertial navigation system and terrain mapping radar. The computational systems required were cutting edge for 1960. We used analog computers the size of refrigerators to solve navigation equations that digital computers couldn't handle yet. The sixth impossible problem was the simplest and most terrible. The weapons payload. Internal bomb bay designed to carry 14 B-41 thermonuclear bombs. Each bomb had a yield of 25 megatons. Total payload of 350 megatons. 20,000 Hiroshimas in a single aircraft. I calculated it one night. A single XB-70 carried enough destructive power to kill everyone in the Soviet Union twice over. Every man, every woman, every child, every dog and cat and bird. Twice. That's when Helen found me at 3 in the morning, staring at the equations, hands shaking. "Ray, come to bed. I'm building a machine that ends civilization. You're building a machine that prevents war. How do you know? Because you're building it well enough that no one will dare use it. That's deterrence, that's peace," I wanted to believe her. Some nights I did. Other nights I wondered if I was just building a very expensive way to commit suicide for the entire human race. But I kept building, because the alternative was letting someone else build it, someone who might not make every rivet perfect, someone who might not care about my father's lesson, someone who might not bring every crew home. While I solved these 6 impossible problems in California, Viktor Petrov faced his own impossibilities in Moscow. The Soviet Union's MiG Design Bureau received the requirement in 1961. Build an interceptor to kill the American Mach 3 bomber, reach Mach 2.8 minimum, climb to 75,000 feet, intercept and destroy targets at speeds and altitudes that had never been operationally achieved. Viktor Petrov accepted the challenge because he had no choice. because saying no to Soviet Air Defense Command wasn't an option, because his two sons from his second marriage were growing up in a world where American bombers might erase Moscow in 2 hours. But Victor faced challenges I didn't have. Soviet industry in 1961 couldn't manufacture titanium at the scale needed. They had the raw material. Russia has vast titanium deposits, but machining it required precision tools, skilled workers, and clean facilities. Soviet factories had none of those things in sufficient quantity. So Victor made a choice that American engineers would later call insane. He built the MiG-25 primarily from nickel steel alloy. Steel is heavy. A titanium airframe of equivalent size would weigh half as much. But steel could be worked by any Soviet factory, could be welded by conscript mechanics with minimal training, could survive harsh Russian winters where titanium became brittle. The weight penalty was enormous. The MiG-25 would weigh 64,000 pounds empty, double what an equivalent titanium design would weigh. But Victor compensated with brute force. Twin Tumansky R-15 engines producing 44,000 pounds of total thrust. Raw power overcoming elegant design. The avionics followed the same philosophy. The radar-designated RP-25 Smerch was one of the most powerful ever fitted to a fighter, but it used vacuum tubes instead of transistors. Vacuum tubes were primitive by American standards. They were heavy. They consumed enormous electrical power, but they were robust. They could survive electromagnetic pulse from nuclear detonations, and they could be replaced by any airfield technician with basic training. This was Soviet engineering philosophy, not optimization for performance under ideal conditions. Optimization for survival, under the worst conditions imaginable. Make it work when everything else has failed. Make it work in Siberian winter. Make it work when maintained by conscripts who barely finished school. Make it work when the alternative is watching American bombers destroy your cities. Victor's test pilot flew the first MiG-25 prototype in 1964. The report was blunt. Comrade Petrov, this aircraft flies like a freight train. It doesn't turn, it doesn't maneuver. It accelerates in a straight line, and that's all. Its only job is to climb to 80,000 feet, fly Mach 2.8, and shoot down American bombers. It doesn't need to dogfight. And if it encounters American fighters, then Soviet fighters will already have failed. The MiG-25 is our last line of defense. It exists for one purpose only, to kill your bomber. Victor's son Dmitry was selected for MiG-25 pilot training in 1963, 25 years old. Qualified on MiG-19ES and MiG-21s. Good pilot, better than good. And now he would fly the interceptor his father designed specifically to face American bombers at the edge of space. Victor watched his son's training flights from the ground control tower, watched the MiG-25 accelerate down the runway and climb almost vertically, afterburners blazing, watched it disappear into the stratosphere where the sky turns from blue to black, and wondered if he was watching his son prepare to die fighting an enemy that might never come. By early 1964, Soviet air defense ordered 1,200 MiG-25 interceptors. Planned deployment across every air defense zone from Kamchatka to Kaliningrad. Estimated cost of 15 to 20 billion rubles, $30 to $40 billion in American currency, all to stop my bomber. All to counter a threat I was building in California. Both of us spending billions. Both of us building weapons for a war we prayed would never happen. Both of us trapped in logic that made perfect sense and no sense at all. But then something happened that changed everything. Something neither of us expected. Something that would lead Victor Petrov to a Texas ranch where everything he believed about America would shatter over breakfast. September 21st, 1964. Air Force Plant 42, Palmdale, California. The XB-70 serial number 20001 sat on the runway. Morning sun reflected off polished metal skin. It looked like a spacecraft more than an aircraft, something that belonged in the next century. I stood on the tarmac with Helen, Susan, and Rebecca. First time my family had seen what I'd been building for 9 years. First time the dream was real enough to touch. Rebecca, who was 9 years old, stared at the Valkyrie with her mouth open. "Daddy, it's beautiful." It's what happens when you refuse to accept impossible. Joe Walker and Carl Thompson sat in the cockpit running pre-flight checks. The 6GEY-93 engines spooled up. The sound wasn't just thunder, it was continuous thunder. It was power made audible. The ground shook. The air vibrated. People covered their ears. The XB-70 rolled down the runway. 210 miles per hour rotation speed because it weighed 550,000 pounds fully loaded. The nose lifted. The delta wings bit into the air. The landing gear retracted. Afterburners ignited. 6 trails of white-hot flame. The Valkyrie climbed at 15,000 feet per minute. Within 60 seconds, it was a speck against the blue sky. Joe Walker's voice crackled over the radio. "Tower, this is Valkyrie 01, and passing 30,000 feet, accelerating through Mach 1. She handles like a dream. 45,000 feet. Mach 1.5. The wingtips folded downward. Compression lift engaging. The miracle of trapped shock waves providing extra lift. 60,000 feet. Mach 2. Everything working perfectly. Every calculation proving correct. Every system nominal. Tower Valkyrie 01 passing Mach 3. Altitude 67,000 feet. Speed 2,056 miles per hour. All systems nominal. Gentlemen, this machine is magic." I collapsed into a chair, started crying, didn't care who saw. 9 years. The impossible was flying. My father's lesson proven again. Impossible is just math nobody solved yet. Helen knelt beside me, hand on my shoulder. "You did it. We did it. Every engineer, every welder, every machinist, we proved it works." The post-flight debrief happened 3 hours later. Joe Walker, still in his pressure suit, face flushed with adrenaline and joy. "Ray, I've flown the X-15 to Mach 6. I've been to the edge of space, but this is different. The XB-70 isn't a rocket. It's sustained Mach 3 cruise. It's operational. It's the future. You built the future." But while we celebrated in California and Moscow, Viktor Petrov received orders that would change both our lives. October 1964, KGB headquarters. Viktor sat in a conference room with senior intelligence officers. They slid a folder across the table. "Comrade Petrov, you will travel to United States, 6 weeks, aerospace exchange program, tour American facilities, attend conferences, gather intelligence." Viktor opened the folder. Itinerary, cover story, contact procedures. "We need to know if XB-70 is operational or propaganda. We need to know if we're spending billions defending against reality or American psychological warfare. You want me to spy? We want you to observe. Americans conduct similar exchanges in Soviet Union. They see our facilities. We see theirs. Everyone pretends it's scientific cooperation. Everyone knows it's espionage. You're aerospace engineer. You have legitimate reason to visit." Viktor returned home that night. His wife Svetlana was cooking dinner. Borscht, black bread, the smell of home. "They're sending me to America." She stopped stirring. "America, 6 weeks, aerospace exchange. I'll tour facilities, attend lectures, eat their food, sleep in their hotels. You'll be safe. It's peacetime exchange, not war. I'll be safe." But what Viktor didn't tell her, what he barely admitted to himself, was that he was terrified, not of American weapons or American spies. He was terrified that he might discover America wasn't the enemy the propaganda described, that the people he was preparing to kill with his MiG-25 interceptors might be human, might be good, might be worth knowing instead of destroying. The KGB briefed him for 2 weeks before departure. Every detail of his cover story, every contact procedure, every method of gathering intelligence without appearing to do so. And they gave him one very specific instruction. Do not accept American hospitality. Bring your own food. Drink only bottled water you open yourself. Never eat meals in American homes. Everything they offer is surveillance. Everything they share is manipulation. Trust nothing. Viktor Petrov landed in Houston, Texas on a Tuesday in late October 1964. The heat and humidity hit him like a physical force. Moscow was already cold, already winter, but Texas in October felt like summer, felt like walking into a warm, wet blanket. His KGB handler met him at the airport. a man posing as a Soviet trade representative. They spoke in Russian while walking to the rental car. Remember, Comrade Petrov? Everything you see is capitalist propaganda. The smiles are fake. The kindness is surveillance. Trust nothing. Report everything. The aerospace tour began the next day. NASA Johnson Space Center. Tours of rocket assembly facilities. Lectures on guidance systems. Meetings with American engineers who asked carefully neutral questions about Soviet capabilities, while Victor asked carefully neutral questions about American capabilities. Everyone pretending it was scientific exchange. Everyone knowing it was chess. On the third day after a lecture at the University of Texas, Austin, a man approached Victor in the hallway. He was black, maybe 55 years old, wearing a suit that had seen better days. He extended his hand. Dr. Petrov, I'm Marcus Washington, former Tuskegee Airman. Now I do aerospace consulting. I heard you survived the siege of Leningrad. Victor shook his hand warily. Yes, 1941 to 1944. My uncle died in the supply convoys, merchant marine, trying to get food and medicine to your city. Never made it. Germans got his ship. Victor didn't know what to say. This wasn't in the KGB briefing. This wasn't surveillance or manipulation. This was a man talking about shared loss. I'm sorry for your uncle. Me too, but I wanted to tell you something. My uncle believed in that mission, believed in helping people who were starving, believed it was right even though it was dangerous, and I want to honor that. So I'm inviting you to my family's ranch this weekend. No shop talk, no politics, just Texas hospitality, just dinner with people who respect what you survived. Victor's training said refuse, said it was surveillance, said it was trap. But Marcus's eyes held something Victor hadn't seen in America yet. Something that looked like genuine respect, like human connection, like the possibility that maybe, just maybe, the propaganda was wrong. Why would you invite me, Soviet engineer? Marcus smiled. Because you and I fought in the same war on the same side against the same evil. And in Texas, we don't let veterans eat alone. Victor heard himself saying yes before his training could stop him. The KGB handlers was furious when Victor told him. But Victor was curious. What was this Texas hospitality that Marcus spoke of with such clear pride he was about to learn? And it would change everything. Saturday morning, Marcus Washington's ranch 90 miles from Houston, 500 acres of Texas cattle country. The house was simple, not luxurious, not the capitalist success Soviet propaganda promised. Just a working ranch house with a wide porch and rocking chairs and the smell of coffee drifting through open windows. Victor woke at 6 in the morning to smells he couldn't identify. His KGB briefing said American food was greasy, tasteless, designed to stupefy the working class into accepting their exploitation. But these smells were smoky, savory, somehow alive in a way that made his stomach ache with hunger he hadn't felt since before his first wife Anna died. He dressed and walked to the kitchen, found Marcus's wife Sarah cooking at the stove, 2 teenage sons setting the table, Vietnam draft notices on the refrigerator. One son had just enlisted, would ship out in 3 months. The other would follow when he turned 18. Sarah turned and smiled. Dr. Petrov, good morning. I hope you're hungry. She placed a plate in front of him. And Victor Petrov's entire understanding of America changed in that moment. Bacon, thick cut, still sizzling, the edges crispy and dark, the center tender and streaked with fat. The smell was overwhelming, smoky and salty and rich beyond description. Eggs, farm fresh, bright orange yolks that broke and ran across the plate like liquid gold. Biscuits, homemade, steam rising when broken open, butter melting into the hot bread. Coffee, strong and black with real cream in a small pitcher. Marcus sat down across from him. Everything's from the ranch except the coffee. We're proud of what we grow. Victor had been instructed to refuse American food, to bring his own bread and water, to never accept their hospitality, because accepting created obligation, and obligation created compromise. But Marcus's family was looking at him with such uncomplicated kindness that refusing felt like an insult, not to capitalism, but to humanity itself. He picked up the bacon, still warm. The smell made his eyes water. He took a bite. For the first time in 23 years since before Anna died in the siege, Viktor Petrov tasted something that felt like joy. The bacon was perfect. Smoky, salty, rich. Nothing like the propaganda described. Nothing like the sawdust bread of Leningrad. Nothing like the gray meat of Moscow commissaries. This was real food made by real people who took pride in their work. This was America distilled into breakfast. Victor's eyes filled with tears. He tried to hide it. Failed. Sarah looked concerned. Dr. Petrov, is something wrong? Victor struggled with English, struggled with emotion, struggled with the realization that everything he'd been told was a lie. Wrong, no. This is real. They told us American food was fake, was propaganda. But this is real. Marcus leaned forward. Victor, can I call you Victor? They lied to you, just like our propaganda probably lied about you. This bacon came from pigs my boys raised. Those eggs are chickens laid yesterday. This ranch has been in my family since my grandfather bought it in 1898. First black landowner in this county. America isn't perfect. I've seen the ugly parts. But this table, this food, this land we work and share, this is what we defend. Not propaganda. This. Victor ate the bacon slowly, tasting each bite, letting it prove that America was real, that the enemy was human, that maybe, just maybe, the weapons he was building and the weapons I was building were preparing to destroy something worth preserving instead of something worth defeating. He spent that weekend learning things the KGB never briefed him on. How to ride a horse, how to fix fence posts, how to play catch with a baseball. Marcus's sons taught him, treated him not like a Soviet spy but like their uncle's friend, like family. They took him to a honky-tonk bar Saturday night. Cowboys bought him beer and asked about his family, about the siege, about his sons. Nobody interrogated him. Nobody tried to extract secrets. They just welcomed him. Just treated him like a human being who'd survived hell and deserved a beer and some kindness. Sunday morning, more bacon, more eggs, more coffee, more proof that America was real. Marcus walked with Victor to the rental car when it was time to leave. Victor, I don't know what you're building in Russia. I don't know what we're building here. But I know this: war is coming if we let it, or peace is coming if we choose it. And the choice starts with breakfast, with sharing food, with seeing each other as human. Victor couldn't speak, just shook Marcus's hand, drove back to Houston with his understanding of everything shattered by bacon and kindness. 3 weeks later, he returned to Moscow, filed his intelligence report with the KGB. XB-70 program appears primarily research-focused, limited production likely, operational deployment questionable, assessment threat level moderate. Recommend continued MiG-25 development, but reduced priority. What he didn't report, I tasted America, and I understood why they would fight to defend it. Understood why billions of rubles worth of interceptors might not be enough. Because you cannot defeat people who share bacon with their enemies. You cannot destroy a country built on the simple human kindness of a Texas rancher, inviting a Soviet engineer to breakfast and treating him like family. Viktor Petrov returned to his work designing MiG-25 improvements. But something had changed. The enemy wasn't just specifications and intelligence reports anymore. The enemy was Marcus, was Sarah, was their sons who would go to Vietnam, was the taste of real bacon made by real people on a real ranch. The weapons were the same, the mission was the same, but the man building them was different. And 5,000 miles away in California, I continued building the XB-70, not knowing that the enemy engineer had been changed by something as simple as breakfast. Not knowing that in 2 years my dream would fall from the sky in flames. Not knowing that 25 years later, Victor and I would meet in a museum and talk about bacon and deterrence and the cruel mathematics of peace. Not knowing that the impossible we'd both achieved wasn't the aircraft we built, but the fact that they never fought each other. The next 18 months were perfect. Every test flight validated every calculation. The XB-70 performed exactly as designed, better than designed. It exceeded our projections for speed, altitude, and handling. 25 successful flights, 0 failures, 0 compromises. Aircraft 20002 joined the program in July 1965. Two Valkyries now proving that sustained Mach 3 flight wasn't just possible but practical. The Air Force started quiet discussions about limited production, maybe 50 aircraft for strategic reconnaissance. Maybe the dream wasn't dead after all. I cut back to 60-hour weeks, started coming home for dinner, made Rebecca's 16th birthday in April 1966, took Helen to dinner in Los Angeles for our anniversary. First real date night in 5 years. She held my hand across the table at a little Italian restaurant in Santa Monica. You look different, lighter somehow. I feel like the war is finally over. World War II, the Cold War, all of it. We built the weapon that prevents the next war. Deterrence works, and maybe, just maybe, I can stop building death machines and just be your husband again. I'd like that. But the universe has a cruel sense of timing, and hubris always comes before the fall. June 7th, 1966. Tuesday evening, I hosted a barbecue at our house in Downey. Test pilots, engineers, families. The backyard filled with people who'd spent years building the impossible together. Children played, adults drank beer and talked about everything except work. For one evening, we were just neighbors enjoying California summer. Joe Walker brought his wife, Grace. They'd been married 22 years. 3 kids all grown now. Joe was talking about retirement. Maybe another 5 years of test flying, then teaching at the Air Force Academy, passing on knowledge to the next generation. Carl Thompson's kids played with Susan and Rebecca in the backyard. Carl's youngest daughter was 6. She had her father's eyes and her mother's smile, and absolutely no understanding that her father flew machines that touched the edge of space. Joe found me by the grill flipping burgers. He grabbed a beer from the cooler. Tomorrow should be easy. Formation flight for GE publicity photos. Nothing technical. I'd been worrying about it for a week. 5 aircraft flying close formation, different sizes, different flight characteristics. The XB-70's wingtip vortices were enormous. We'd never flown that close with other aircraft. Watch the vortices, Joe. The mathematical model suggests they extend 50 feet behind the wingtips at formation speed. Ray, I've flown the X-15 to Mach 6. Formation flying is kindergarten. The XB-70 isn't a normal aircraft. The vortices are stronger than anything we've modeled before. Trust me, I'll see you for dinner tomorrow night. Helen's making pot roast, right? She makes terrible pot roast. We laughed. Joe clapped me on the shoulder, grabbed another beer, walked back to his wife. Last normal moment. Last time everything was okay. I should have insisted. Should have demanded they increase separation distances. Should have run more tests. Should have trusted the unease that had been growing in my gut all week. But I didn't, because Joe was right. He'd flown everything. He was the best. And formation flying really was simple compared to the X-15 missions that had made him famous. So I said nothing. And the next day, my silence killed 2 men. June 8th, 1966, Wednesday morning, 10 o'clock. Perfect California weather. Not a cloud in the sky. Visibility unlimited. The kind of morning where you could see forever. 5 aircraft formed up at 25,000 feet, 300 miles per hour. The XB-70 Valkyrie in the center. F-104 Starfighter on the right. F-4 Phantom on the left. F-5 Freedom Fighter and T-38 Talon filling out the formation. All GE engines, all American engineering, all beautiful. The chase plane with photographers flew above and to the side, getting angles, getting shots that would look perfect in Aviation Week magazine. Perfect propaganda showing American technological superiority. Radio chatter was relaxed, professional, routine. Helen stood beside me on the observation platform. She'd taken another day off to watch. She squeezed my hand. It's like watching a ballet, so graceful. The F-104 drifted slightly aft and inboard. Mike Adams adjusting position for a better camera angle. Just a few feet, nothing unusual. Formation flying requires constant, tiny corrections. Then physics took over. The F-104 entered the XB-70's wingtip vortex, the invisible column of rotating air that my calculations had predicted, that I'd warned about, that nobody took seriously enough. From the ground, it looked gentle at first. The F-104 rolled left, corrected, rolled again, like a boat caught in unexpected current. Then the vertical stabilizer struck the XB-70's right wing. Metal screamed against metal. The sound reached us 5 seconds later, like tearing sheet metal, like the world breaking. The F-104 exploded, orange and black fireball. Debris scattered in all directions. Mike Adams killed instantly, vaporized, gone before he could even understand what was happening. The shockwave from the explosion engulfed the XB-70's tail section. Both vertical stabilizers shattered. The Valkyrie continued flying for 16 seconds. False hope, false belief that maybe it would survive. Then the yaw began. Without directional control, the massive bomber started rotating around its vertical axis. Slowly at first, then faster. The pilots fought with everything they had: differential thrust, ailerons, pure determination. Joe Walker's voice came through the speakers, still professional, still trained not to panic, but strain underneath. Edwards Tower Valkyrie 02, we've lost both vertical stabilizers, not responding to rudder inputs, attempting differential thrust control. The XB-70 entered a flat spin, not violent tumbling, almost graceful, like a falling leaf. A 550,000-pound falling leaf made of steel and dreams and mathematics that had stopped working. We're in flat spin, cannot recover. Carl, initiate escape sequence. This was what the escape capsules were designed for. What we tested dozens of times with dummies. What was supposed to save them when everything else failed. Carl Thompson's capsule doors began closing, sealing him in protective steel. But the violent rotation created G-forces the system wasn't designed for. The separation mechanism jammed. The capsule sealed but wouldn't detach. He was trapped. Where? Conscious, knowing he was about to die and unable to do anything except wait for impact. Joe's capsule separated successfully. The parachute deployed, a small white flower blooming against blue sky. But the ejection shattered 2 vertebrae in his back, ruptured his spleen, collapsed 1 lung. He would survive, but he would never fly again. The XB-70 continued its rotation. Down, down, still graceful, still impossible to believe this was real. Helen's fingernails cut into my palm. She was screaming. I couldn't hear her over the sound of my heart breaking. Impact. 8 miles from Edwards. 550,000 pounds of aircraft meeting desert floor at 300 miles per hour. The fireball rose 2,000 feet into the air. Smoke visible from Las Vegas, from San Bernardino, from everywhere and nowhere. I ran toward it. Don't remember deciding to run. Just found myself running. Security tackled me, held me down while I fought them, while I screamed, while I vomited into sand that smelled like burning fuel and burning metal and burning flesh. Helen pulled me up. Marcus Washington held my shoulders, kept me upright when my legs wouldn't work. I built that. I killed them. Marcus's voice was gentle. No, Ray. Physics killed them. Bad luck killed them. You built something magnificent. This isn't your fault. But it was. I knew it was. I'd calculated the vortex strength. I'd known it was dangerous. And I'd said nothing because Joe was the best and surely the best pilot in the world could handle a simple formation flight. Mike Adams was 37 years old. Left behind a wife and 2 young sons. Closed casket funeral because there wasn't enough left for anything else. Carl Thompson was 41. Wife Margaret. 3 children. The youngest was 6 years old. She would grow up knowing her father died in a publicity stunt. Died getting photographs for a magazine. Died for nothing. Joe Walker survived. Spent 6 months in the hospital. Multiple surgeries. Physical therapy that left him screaming in pain. He would live another 38 years. But he would never fly again. Never feel wheels leave the runway. Never touch the edge of space. The thing that made him who he was taken away in 90 seconds. The investigation took 6 months. National Transportation Safety Board, Air Force, NASA, every agency that had jurisdiction. They reviewed telemetry, interviewed witnesses, reconstructed the collision frame by frame. Final conclusion. Aerodynamic phenomenon. The F-104 entered the wingtip vortex produced by the XB-70's delta wing configuration. No design flaw in the XB-70. No pilot error, just physics and tragedy intersecting in 3 dimensions. No fault assigned. But I knew better. I'd calculated those vortices. I'd known they were dangerous. And I'd let the flight proceed because everyone said it was safe and I didn't trust my own mathematics over their experience. I visited Joe in the hospital 3 days after the crash, before the investigation restricted access, before everything became official and documented and legal. He was heavily sedated, back brace, IV lines, oxygen mask, monitors beeping steadily. He looked small in the hospital bed. Joe Walker, who'd flown higher and faster than any man alive, reduced to broken bones and morphine dreams. His eyes opened when I sat down. Recognition took a moment. Ray, I'm so sorry, Joe. This is my fault. I should have warned you better, should have insisted on greater separation, should have trusted my calculations. Stop. Not your fault. Aerodynamic vortex. Happens. We knew risks. Carl's dead. Yeah, and Mike. But Ray, listen. XB-70 worked perfectly. Every calculation was correct, every system nominal. You built something magnificent. Don't let this steal that from you. But it already had. The magnificence was gone, replaced by smoke and fire and the memory of my friend falling from the sky. July 1966. Air Force decision arrived on official letterhead. XB-70 program terminated. Aircraft 20002 destroyed. Aircraft 20001 will continue limited research flights until 1969, then retire to museum. No production aircraft. Program concluded. The dream was over. The 50 aircraft we'd hoped for gone. The vindication of 11 years of work erased by 90 seconds of tragedy. I continued working at North American Aviation. They transferred me to Space Shuttle Thermal Protection Research, applying XB-70 lessons to reentry heat management. Important work, useful work, work that felt hollow because every calculation reminded me of the calculations that had failed to save Carl Thompson. 1970, I retired at 57, too young by anyone's measure, but too old to keep building weapons, too tired to keep carrying the weight. Helen found me in the garage one evening. I was burning papers, awards, citations, photographs from the XB-70 program. Ray, what are you doing? Getting rid of it, all of it. The dream that killed my friends. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. I spent 11 years building the most advanced aircraft in history. It flew perfectly for 18 months. Then it killed 2 men during a publicity stunt. What kind of legacy is that? She took the papers from my hands, pulled me into a hug while I cried. The legacy is that millions of people lived because deterrence worked. The XB-70 never bombed Moscow. That's success, Ray. That's what you built. I wanted to believe her. Some days I did. Most days I just felt the weight of Carl Thompson's death and Joe Walker's shattered body and the knowledge that my mathematics had been correct and I'd ignored them. 20 years I carried that weight. 20 years of avoiding aerospace conferences, of throwing away invitations to speak, of refusing interviews about the XB-70 program, of trying to forget the dream that had turned into nightmare, until a letter arrived in October 1989 that changed everything. The letter came to our house in Downey, Soviet postmark, official looking. My first thought was that it was a prank. The Soviet Union didn't send letters to retired American aerospace engineers. But it was real. An invitation to meet Viktor Petrov at the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., November 18, 1989. 2 old engineers who'd built weapons to kill each other, meeting in peace during Glasnost. I almost threw it away, almost ignored it. But something in the letter caught my attention. Mr. Mitchell, I understand you may not remember me, but in 1964 I visited Texas as part of Aerospace Exchange Program. I met a man named Marcus Washington who showed me what America truly means. I would like to discuss with you what our aircraft meant, what deterrence meant, what peace costs. Marcus, the same Marcus who'd supervised the Palmdale facility, who'd been Tuskegee Airman, who'd saved my life by holding me upright when the XB-70 crashed and my legs wouldn't work. Helen found me reading the letter for the 3rd time. You should go. Why, what's the point? Our aircraft never fought. The whole thing was waste. Or the whole thing was success. Go find out which. November 18th, 1989, National Air and Space Museum. I arrived early, stood beneath the Bell X-1 that had broken the sound barrier in 1947, the aircraft that had started everything, the proof that impossible was just a dare waiting to be accepted. Viktor Petrov walked in at exactly 2 o'clock, 82 years old, thin, using a cane, but his eyes were sharp, engineer's eyes that had seen too much and understood more. We shook hands, two old men, former enemies, neither of us sure how to start. I broke the silence. Dr. Petrov, thank you for coming. I don't know what to say. Start with truth. We built weapons to kill each other. They never killed each other. Is that success or failure? I don't know anymore. We moved to the museum cafeteria, found a quiet corner, ordered coffee that was terrible but reminded me of every late night in the North American aviation facility, calculating until my eyes burned. Victor stirred his coffee slowly. Your letter mentioned in 1964. You knew Marcus Washington. I know Marcus. Good man. He consulted on XB-70 thermal coatings. He invited me to his ranch, gave me bacon for breakfast. Best meal of my life. I must have looked confused because Victor smiled. You don't understand. In Siege of Leningrad, we ate sawdust bread. My first wife, Anna, died of starvation. After war, everything gray, tasteless. But that bacon Marcus gave me, it was real. It tasted like life, like truth. He told me this is what we defend, not propaganda. This. And I understood. Something shifted in my chest, some weight I'd been carrying for 23 years loosened slightly. You tasted America, real America, not weapons, not politics, just bacon. Yes, and I filed intelligence reports saying XB-70, probably not operational threat. Because I knew if Americans fight to defend right, to raise pigs, and share bacon with enemies, they will fight forever, cannot defeat that. I told him about June 8, 1966, every detail I'd been holding for 23 years. The crash, Carl Thompson trapped in the escape capsule, Joe Walker's injuries, my guilt, the 20 years of wait. I built the most advanced aircraft in history. It killed my friends in a publicity stunt. Victor listened, didn't interrupt. Let me finish. Then he told me about the MiG-25, about building 1,200 interceptors to stop 2 American bombers, about his son Dmitry flying MiG-25s for 15 years and never firing a shot in combat, about spending billions of rubles preparing for a war that never came. I built 1,200 interceptors to stop 2 bombers. One crashed on its own, one retired to museum. Most expensive joke in history. We both laughed. Bitter laughter, but healing somehow. Recognition that we'd both succeeded at the wrong thing. Or maybe succeeded at exactly the right thing. Ray, can I call you Ray? Your friend Carl died? That's tragedy. But how many Soviet pilots didn't die because XB-70 was canceled? How many American pilots didn't die because MiG-25 made attacking too dangerous? Deterrence is cruel mathematics. Some die so millions don't. You're saying Carl's death prevented more deaths. I'm saying deterrence works by being terrible enough that no one dares test it. Your XB-70 never bombed Moscow. My MiG-25 never shot down American pilots. That's success. Cruel success, but success. Victor reached into his coat pocket, pulled out something wrapped in cloth, unwrapped it carefully, a small piece of titanium polished smooth engraved with Cyrillic letters. This is from MiG-25 that my son Dmitry flew. He never killed anyone, flew 15 years, never fired weapon in anger. I want you to have it, because your weapon and my weapon, they succeeded by never fighting. I took the titanium. It was warm from his pocket. The Cyrillic engraving read, "Peace through strength." I don't have anything to give you. You gave me bacon in 1964, through Marcus. You gave me understanding that America was real, not propaganda. That's enough. We talked for 3 more hours about engineering, about families, about the price of survival, about whether building weapons that prevented war was moral or just lucky, about whether we were heroes or fools or both. When we finally stood to leave, Victor shook my hand again. Ray, do you regret building XB-70? I thought about it, really thought. For the first time in 23 years, examined the question honestly. I regret Carl, I regret Joe's pain, but I don't regret proving Mach 3 was possible. That data went into Space Shuttle, into SR-71, into every hypersonic weapon being developed today. The XB-70 never fought. Maybe that's its greatest victory. We built weapons for war that never came. Maybe that makes us most successful weapons designers in history. I lived another 24 years after meeting Victor. He died in 1995 at 88. I kept a piece of titanium on my desk. Reminder that enemies can become not quite friends, but something more important. Witnesses to each other's humanity. I consulted occasionally on hypersonics. Watched the Cold War end. Watched the Soviet Union collapse. Watched the Berlin Wall fall. Watched everything we'd built weapons to prevent or cause or survive just fade into history like morning fog. 2012. I was 99 years old. Helen had passed 2 years earlier. Susan and Rebecca visited regularly. Grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Life continuing despite everything. I wrote a letter that year, addressed it to Rebecca, marked it open when I'm gone. In it, I explained about Victor, about the bacon, about deterrence being cruel mathematics, about how Carl Thompson's death and Mike Adams's death and Joe Walker's suffering had purchased something we couldn't measure, but could only hope was worth the price. I explained that the XB-70 succeeded not by fighting, but by existing. That Victor's MiG-25 succeeded the same way. That millions of people lived full lives because deterrence worked. I explained that Marcus Washington's simple act of sharing bacon with a Soviet engineer had done more for peace than all our weapons combined. That kindness was strategy. That humanity was deterrence. That the real American values weren't in our bombers, but in our willingness to see enemies as humans worth knowing. I died March 2013. 100 years old, surrounded by family. The titanium piece Victor gave me went to the Smithsonian. The XB-70 still sits in Dayton. And somewhere Marcus Washington's grandchildren still raise pigs on that Texas ranch. Today, if you visit the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio, you'll find the XB-70 on display in the Cold War Gallery. It still looks futuristic, still looks impossible, still looks like something that belongs in tomorrow instead of yesterday. The museum placard tells visitors about Mach 3 flight, about compression lift, about the technological achievements. But it also tells them this: the Soviet Union responded to the XB-70 by building over 1,200 MiG-25 interceptors. Neither aircraft ever fought the other. That absence of combat represents deterrence's greatest success. Chief Engineer Raymond Mitchell and Soviet designer Viktor Petrov met in 1989, two engineers who built impossible machines for a war that never came. Rebecca visits sometimes with her grandchildren, stands beneath the Delta wings, tells them about their great-grandfather who refused to accept impossible, who built the future, who carried guilt for 23 years until a Soviet engineer taught him that success doesn't always look like victory. And when her youngest grandchild asks what great-grandpa built, Rebecca smiles. He built peace, one impossible dream at a time, one strip of bacon shared with an enemy, one act of kindness that proved propaganda wrong. He built weapons that succeeded by never fighting. And he learned that the real American values weren't in our bombers, but in our willingness to see humanity in everyone, even enemies, especially enemies, because enemies are just people we haven't shared bacon with yet. The XB-70 stands silent, beautiful, impossible, a dream that outran itself, and in doing so proved that sometimes the greatest victories are the battles never fought. Sometimes the best weapons are the ones never fired. Sometimes peace costs more than war, but delivers something war never can. Hope, future, the possibility that maybe, just maybe, humans can build impossible things and then choose not to use them. That's the legacy. That's what the bacon meant. That's what Victor and I finally understood. We built the dream, and then we let it rust in museums rather than rain fire from the sky, and millions of people lived because of that choice. That's success. Cruel, expensive, impossible success, but success nonetheless.